Hello to all my Tunisian Embassy friends. For those of you who I haven't met in person, my name is Carol. I've been here in Tunisia since January with my partner Liz, and we were so excited to come here and so excited for the opportunity to travel and dash off to Europe for the weekend. And instead, here we are, like all of you, stuck in our homes, cooking for ourselves. And so I thought I would take the opportunity to give you guys some tips on how to cook at home, how to keep it interesting. You may be wondering why you should listen to me or how I'm qualified to give you this advice on cooking. So a little about me. I was a chef for over 10 years and cooked professionally in both Charlotte, North Carolina and Boston. I worked a lot with both pastry and seafood, very different, I know, but I worked at several different places. So if you have questions about anything else that you'd like to cook, there's a ton of really beautiful fresh seafood here. I'd be really happy to answer questions about those things as well. I know that many people in the embassy ordered a vegetable shipment that they picked up last week, and one of the things that came in that shipment was artichokes. Artichokes can be an intimidating vegetable if you've never cooked with them before, and so I'm going to show you a really simple way to roast them. You can also boil or steam them as well, but this way I think imparts a lot more flavor and shows a little bit more personality to the artichoke. If you don't know, artichokes are actually thistles. And will bloom into flowers, as you can see here. You wouldn't usually think of eating a thistle, and this entire thing is not edible. Really, when you're cooking with artichokes, you're going for sort of the meaty base of the leaves, some of the younger leaves on the inside, and then the very prized choke that lies in the center. And we'll talk more about that as we're cutting and cleaning our artichokes. I always think with entertaining and with recipes, it's important to think about your meal as a whole. And so I've decided to also give some suggestions on what to drink with our artichokes. Since we have a little more time on our hands, we're spending a little bit too much time with the kids, who knows. I would traditionally say that one of the best pairings with artichokes is a really acidic white wine, something with no oak in it. Something that is going to be really bright to sort of offset the heavier bitter flavors of the artichoke. A Gruner Veltliner works really well, Pinot Grigio, anything that's going to be very bright. However, today we're going to do something slightly different and make a spritzer. This will be made with white dry vermouth and some bubbly water. So I'm going to show you how to make that really quickly. It's also low alcohol, so good for afternoon cooking. And then we'll get into the artichoke. Now, for those of you who have ever made a spritzer before, I'm sure you know it needs almost no recipe, and it really can be made according to your taste and specifications. I am using the very classic Martini and Rossi extra dry white vermouth for mine. It's what I had on hand. And I'm going to do a little bit more vermouth than soda water because that's the kind of day I'm having, but you can do more or less depending on how much alcohol you want. And then you just top it off with a little bubbly water. It's very refreshing, easy to drink. If you wanted a non-alcoholic version of this, you could just go with something like a sparkling lemonade, or even a really dry sparkling cider. So super easy, very refreshing, and cheers. So I've also provided you with a link to the written recipe so that you can follow along at your own pace when you're ready to make them with all of the ingredients and all of the instructions. But to get started, we're going to need 3 artichokes, some olive oil, a lemon, 6 to 8 cloves of garlic, depending on how garlicky you would like your final artichoke dish to be, some red pepper flakes, some salt, some pepper, and then when we're ready to serve, you're going to need about 1/4 cup of melted butter. So let's get started. Okay, so one of my first tips for you is actually going to be part of your setup. An easy way to make it so your cutting board doesn't slide is to take a damp paper towel, just fold it in half and place your cutting board on top of it, and that way it's nice and stable for you while you're using sharp tools. Okay, so we're going to take our artichoke and clean it up a little bit. I'm going to pull off that large leaf there. Now I cut off the top inch or so of my artichoke, like that, and you can see that that reveals a really beautiful interior. Artichokes are actually one of my favorite vegetables, in part because they're so beautiful. And then you're gonna flip it around and trim the stem so you have about an inch or two left on there. You can actually eat the middle of the stem. It's sort of the same texture and taste as the choke, but it can get a little woody the further down you go, and if you're using an older artichoke. So once you've done that, we're just going to clean off some of these lower leaves and the older outer leaves. These are pretty young artichokes, so I'm not going to take off all of the outer leaves because they're not too dense, but you can get some of the older artichokes that tend to be really woody and heavy. Okay, so once we have cleaned up our artichoke by trimming the ends, pulling off these leaves, we're also going to go ahead and trim the pointy ends of the leaves. These are, again, pretty young, and so they're not super pointy, but I think it's helpful and it avoids hazard down the road. I also, to me, gives it a nice look and presentation. So we're just going to go ahead and do that all the way around. Once your artichoke is all trimmed up, make sure you clear your cutting board. You're going to want to make sure that you have your lemon ready for this. So I've already cut mine in half, and we'll use this and then we'll zest it a little bit later because artichokes, once they're cut, can brown pretty quickly. So we're going to go ahead and cut that in half, and you can see again how absolutely gorgeous the inside of this is. Off that little piece, and then we're just going to rub the cut lemon all over the cut pieces of the artichoke to stop any browning. You might get a little browning, and that's totally okay because you're going to roast it, and probably no one will be able to tell anyway. The next step here is we're going to prepare the piece of the artichoke that we're going to stuff. As I said before, this is a thistle, and so you can sort of see the very thistly part here in the center. And we're just going to take a little spoon, little coffee teaspoon works really well, and scoop out that part. You want to make sure you get it all, but you also want to make sure that you're not digging into the choke, which is, again, the best, well, at least in my opinion, the best part of the artichoke. And it's usually what people are going for. When you buy jarred artichokes in the grocery store, that's what you are getting, is the choke of the artichoke. I'm going to pull out some of these center leaves as well here, just to make a little more room for our filling, so we can get maximum flavor in there. So you're just going to go ahead and do this with all of the artichokes. Today we're using 3. But depending on your family size or how hungry you are, you can use more or less. Okay, so now that we have cleaned and cut all of our artichokes, and you can see that I have some browning here, which is totally fine, we are going to work on the filling. I've just neatly nestled mine into a roasting pan here. Anything like this will work. You can line it with foil for easier cleanup as well. So I'm going to set this aside while we prepare the filling. As I said earlier, we are going to be using the zest of the lemon. So traditionally, I would zest this first, but I wanted to put this in for you guys to see. So let's pretend that we're at the beginning of our recipe. We're going to cut our lemon in half so that we can rub it all over our artichokes. And I'm just going to take my microplaner. If you don't have a microplaner, you can use a cheese grater that has really small holes, or I'll show you a really easy way that you can cut zest to be really fine if you don't have either of those. So just a quick little zest here. We're going to do the whole thing. Just like that, and we're going to set that aside for our filling, and then you could go ahead and cut this in half and use it. We'll use it in the rest of the recipe. If you're saying to yourself, Carol, I don't have a microplaner or a small holed grater, then I'm just going to show you a really quick trick on how to zest a lemon. So if you take a vegetable peeler, it doesn't have to be the shape, it can be whatever shape you happen to have at home, and then lightly, because you don't want to get a bunch of the pith in there, peel off some of that outer zest there. And then you're just going to finely chop that. And you can do sort of little batons one way, and then chop the other way to get a really fine mince on this. And then just sort of go crazy. Run your knife through it. You want it to be really fine. These will cook down as we cook the artichokes anyway. We're just trying to get small glimpses of that lemon flavor throughout the dish, so you really don't want it to be too choppy. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to chop up our garlic. Now, I really like garlic, as do I think a lot of people, and so I'm going to use about 8 cloves here, and we're just going to give these sort of a rough chop. It doesn't need to be too pretty. We will add these to our dipping sauce at the end, so you don't want them to be too big, but they also don't need to be perfect. I like the slightly bigger pieces on these because we're really trying to fill that cavity in the artichoke, and the larger pieces help do that. Next, we're going to get our herbs ready. So this part of the recipe, you can really tailor it to your taste, your family tastes, and you could put, basil in yours, but maybe not basil in your picky eaters. It just is a great way to feed a family, to feed friends who might have different preferences. So I'm just going to take this basil, and this is just what I had on hand. I think rosemary would be really lovely in this as well. Again, just sort of a rough chop. Okay, now we're going to work on stuffing our artichokes. All right, so I'm going to take that same spoon that we used to clean out the chokes and make sure that there's none of the thistle left on it, and just help kind of dish this garlic and basil right into the center of each artichoke here. And then we're going to season with some of the lemon zest. And then a little salt and pepper just all over everything. Now I like to use some freshly cracked pepper. I think it actually makes a big difference in flavor, but whatever we have on hand during quarantine is what we're using. I'm also using some red pepper flakes. If you do not like spice, then you can skip or just go lighter. I happen to like the lemon garlic spice combination, and so we're going to go with that here. I'm then going to drizzle some olive oil all over. We in Tunisia here are very lucky to have some incredible quality olive oil. And you can see I'm being very generous. You can be as generous or not as you like, but you do kind of want to coat it, and we're going to flip these over and sort of rub them around in the olive oil, and then give another good coating on top. Okay, so now that we are all stuffed, we're just going to do a quick flip on the artichokes here. We're going to roast them cut side down. Make sure your stuffing is nicely packed in there. Okay, and then we are going to do just another little drizzle of olive oil over top. You can get a little preview of my slippers down there. You can see I haven't put on real shoes in 2 weeks. And then we're just gonna salt generously here, pepper, and then again for me, I'm gonna do some of these red pepper flakes for a little panache there. All right, and then we're just gonna go ahead and stick these into an oven that's been preheated to 375 degrees, and we'll check back in. Okay, so we're just checking in on our artichokes here. We're about halfway through the cooking time, and you can see they're starting to get nice and brown. You can hear a little sizzling in there, and the house smells amazing like garlic. So I'm pretty happy with how they're browning. I'm gonna keep them uncovered. You know, it's definitely a personal preference on how dark you might like your artichoke roasted, but we're gonna let them go for another 15 minutes and then check on them again. Okay, so once the artichokes have cooled down a little bit, or if you don't have a regard for the feeling in the ends of your fingertips, you can do this when they're really hot. You're just gonna lift this up, and you can see that garlic and herb sort of stays behind, and we're just gonna place the cooked artichokes into a bowl to rest. And then we're gonna scoop all of the herbs and garlic and everything that's left behind together to add into our butter dipping sauce. Okay, so we're gonna take our melted butter, and you can melt this however you would like, on the stove, in the microwave, whatever works. And we're just gonna scrape all these good parts up and put them directly into the butter. Once you've done that, you could just stir everything together, and then we're ready to eat. And now we've gotten to the best part of cooking, the part where we eat. If you've never eaten an artichoke before, it's a very hands-on experience. You're just gonna get in there and pull the leaves off. They get more tender as you get closer to the inside of the artichoke. So we're just gonna take the leaf, dip it in some butter, and pull that meat right off the bottom. Once you get to the very inside, to the heart of the artichoke, you can trim off any of the tough exterior, dip that in some butter, and save that for yourself. It's the best part. Thank you guys so much for watching this. If you have any questions about how to do this or anything else that you may have gotten in the embassy shipment, please let me know. But once you get deep into the, no. All right, Liz, can you not talk?